Mid 2024 special, the Granite State Debates.
Maggie Goodlander has worked in government for much of her professional career, from serving as a foreign policy advisor in the Senate and an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserve, to a senior advisory position in President Biden's White House, where her husband still serves as national security advisor. The Nashua native also taught constitutional law at UNH and Dartmouth College. Colin Van Ostern moved to New Hampshire in the 2000s to work on Democratic campaigns. He then spent time in the private sector, including roles at Stonyfield Yogurt, Alumni Ventures, and Southern New Hampshire University. The 2016 Democratic nominee for governor also served 2 terms on the Executive Council and has the endorsement of retiring Congresswoman Annie Kuster.
Now, the Democratic candidates in the 2nd Congressional District.
Thank you for joining us tonight for the Granite State Debates. I'm WMUR Political Director Adam Sexton. In this hour, we're hearing from the Democratic candidates in the 2nd Congressional District. They're joining us live tonight. They'll be answering questions from me and from our panelists. Those panelists tonight are WMUR anchors Ariel Metropolis and Steve Botari. Here's a look at our format. Each candidate will get up to 60 seconds to answer a question, and they'll have 30 seconds for a rebuttal if necessary. Those will be granted at my discretion. Let's kick things off tonight in this debate with Steve Botari.
Go to the grocery store these days and anybody can see the price of food, from eggs to milk to meat, is still incredibly high because of inflation. What is one thing you think the Biden administration got wrong with this when it came to dealing with higher prices, and what can Congress do to help? Mr. Van Ostern, to you first.
Well, thanks for asking, and thanks everybody for watching. This is such an extraordinary opportunity to have a conversation with our friends and neighbors here in New Hampshire about how we can move our country forward. To the question about inflation, look, I think that we need to have been pushing much longer and harder to lower interest rates in this country. There are a lot of different ways that we can do that. In our next Congress, we can do it by repealing the Trump tax cuts for the very wealthiest, very biggest corporations. But the truth is that with interest rates as high as they've been, some economists say they think that families should just be able to take the pain. The truth is everyone getting a new mortgage, everyone getting a new car, everyone trying to expand a small business like the small business that my wife and I own, are feeling the crunch because of that. We need to hold big corporations accountable who've been seeing their profits go up, where everyday people are seeing prices go up at the exact same time. But we also need to make sure our government is fighting for us, everyday people and everyday families like the one that I grew up in.
Ms. Goodlander, what did the Biden administration get wrong about the high prices, and what can Congress do to help?
Well, it's great to be with you tonight. Thanks so much to WMUR for having us, and thanks to all the viewers out there tuning in from home. I'm Maggie Goodlander. I'm born and raised right here in New Hampshire. I love this state, and I've been fighting on the front lines of the fights that are on the ballot on Tuesday. I've been fighting for the values that I learned growing up here, too, including the values of hard work and the importance of a fair deal. So what I'd say is, I learned a lot from the work I did on the front lines of the fight against corporate monopolies that are jacking up costs for hardworking Granite Staters all across the board, whether it's the cost of rent, the cost of groceries, the cost of prescription drugs. I saw firsthand the power of what we really need to see from Congress, which is an update to our antitrust and consumer protection laws that are really the promise of a fair deal for all hardworking people. It's not enough, and I've heard from so many people in pain on the campaign trail, feeling the pain of high prices while corporate profits have never been higher. Congress can do something about this, and I want to bring this fight to Congress.
Next question now from Ariel Metropolis.
Thank you, Adam. While much of the attention on illegal crossings has been focused on the southern border, in just the past year and a half, more than 12,000 people have been apprehended in the Swanton sector of the northern border. That includes New Hampshire, Vermont, and part of New York. Should Congress take action to block illegal immigration into the Granite State? Ms. Goodlander, we'll start with you.
Look, we need to see Congress take action on immigration reform and border security in this country. We are a nation of immigrants, and I know this. My family story starts right here in Nashua, in New Hampshire, just south of Manchester, but in Nashua, where my great-grandfather was able to come to this country because we had immigration laws and a system of immigration that was able to meet the moment. Our laws are outdated, and I was very proud early in my career to be part of a process. 11 years ago, we came together in a bipartisan way, put together a bill, a landmark bill, a bipartisan bill. No one thought it could get through the United States Senate. It did. It passed. And it's become a framework for the future. And right now, what we see is one person standing in between the American people and the immigration reform and border security updates we need to see, and that's Donald Trump. And it's because he's concluded that it's in his personal political interest to stand in between the American people and border security reforms that would make a big difference for people here in New Hampshire. You know, border security technology that would stop the flow of illegal drugs, deadly drugs that are flowing across official ports of entry.
That's time.
Mr. Van Ostern.
Thank you.
thoughts?
Thanks for the question about our border here in New Hampshire. The geographic range that you mentioned is one that goes hundreds of miles across a number of different states. When you look more granularly at the New Hampshire border, for the most recent period, I think the number was 0 interdictions. Look, I do think that we need more tech and help and support for local communities along the northern towns in New Hampshire. A lot of the area doesn't even have consistent cell phone coverage, so I'll certainly welcome more federal aid and help. But let's not pretend that there's a crisis in our northern border the way there is on our southern border. We need border security on our southern border. Both parties have dropped the ball too much on this, but yes, it is Donald Trump's fault. He said, blame me for this not happening. We need to get border security done. We also need comprehensive immigration reform. I've had 3 times working in the private sector here in New Hampshire where I've lost a valued member of our team to government typos on their visa renewal applications. It's overdue to get this done. It'll unlock economic growth for New Hampshire if we do it.
Next question on Israel. Today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is, quote, not close. Would you continue to support sending aid to Israel if negotiations continue to stall? Ms. Goodlander.
You know, the relationship between the United States and Israel is one that is rooted in deeply held values and also deeply held interests. I know from my experience serving as an intelligence officer in the United States Navy Reserve, I know firsthand the importance of the relationship, the intelligence relationship, and the defense cooperation relationship that we have with the state of Israel. My view is that the relationship cannot be defined by the person who's sitting in the Prime Minister's office in Israel, just in the same way that we would never want our relationships in the world to be defined by who's sitting in the Oval Office. If that were the case, the 4 years that we had Donald Trump as president would have destroyed America's relationships all across the world. So to me, the relationship is much deeper, and it is rooted deeply in the idea that we are both democracies. And so Congress plays an incredibly important role in this relationship. I saw it firsthand when I started my career in the United States Senate as a staffer, where there was a bipartisan, bicameral supermajority of members of Congress who were helping to advance American interests and American values. And that's what I want to be a part of in Congress.
Would you continue the aid, though, Ms. Goodlander?
You know, we have a memorandum of understanding that was negotiated during the Obama administration that governs our defense relationship with Israel. And that is a memorandum of understanding that I believe should continue.
Mr. Van Ostern, same question to you.
I certainly wouldn't shut off aid for a nation that's seen such an extraordinary level of terrorism. And I've been really heartened in my conversations with people here in New Hampshire about how so many of us can hold multiple ideas in our mind at the same time that are not at tension with each other. One is the attacks of October 7th of last year were devastating terrorism. 1,200 people killed, hundreds taken hostage. Some of the hostages just executed this past weekend. And Israel has a right to defend itself. It has a right to exist, and it's an incredibly important ally of the United States of America. And it's entirely consistent with that to also acknowledge the humanitarian crisis since is untenable. Now, it's hard, it's complicated. Sometimes this is because Hamas is hiding under hospitals because they want this crisis to continue. But we have to use every diplomatic tool that we have in order to bring this to a close. I believe the long-term solution here has to be a diplomatic one. It's going to come in the form of a 2-state solution. So the people of Israel and Palestine both have democratic self-governance that will help break the cycle of terrorism that we're in right now.
Next question comes from Steve Botari.
Mr. Van Ostern, just last week, former Governor John Lynch withdrew his endorsement of you, saying, quote, I'm going to quote him here, I think his campaign is one of the nastiest I've seen in my 50 years of being involved in elections here in New Hampshire, unquote. Governor Lynch is respected and well-liked by many Granite Staters, regardless of party. What does it say about the way you're running your campaign?
Well, I think he must be watching different television ads than the ones that most of us have been seeing. I think John Lynch was a good governor. And sometimes even someone like him makes an error of judgment. An error of judgment in who he supports in this race, just like the error of judgment he made when he nominated Kelly Ayotte to be Attorney General in our state. I'm incredibly proud of our grassroots support in this race. Our Congresswoman, every single Democratic mayor in our district, every labor union that has made an endorsement, 100 current and former state legislators. And I know the truth is sometimes it's confusing when huge amounts of money come in from outside of our state and pollute our elections. The first ever television attack ad against a Democrat in a primary in New Hampshire, in a state primary, is one that was aired against me on behalf of my primary opponent here by one of those shady out-of-state super PACs. She's brought $4 million into this state between her campaign and these super PACs. 95% of it is from people who can't even vote here. Now, when that happens, you gotta respond, you gotta set the record straight, and you gotta make sure people aren't confused.
Ms. Goodlander, 30 seconds to respond.
Let's set the record straight here once and for all. These shady out-of-state interests that my opponent just referred to are groups including Emily's List. Emily's List is the biggest organization in this country dedicated to electing more pro-choice women to Congress at a time when we've got less than 30% women in the People's House. He's talking about Vote Vets. Vote Vets is an organization dedicated to electing more veterans to Congress, more Democrats who are veterans to Congress. These groups, I'm proud to have the support of veterans and women all across this district. I'm proud to have the support of people in more than 200 towns across New Hampshire. We're running an old school New Hampshire campaign, and my opponent's attacks are the reason that Governor John Lynch said that this is the most dishonest campaign he's seen in 50 years.
We'll give you 15 to respond there, Colin.
Thanks. Actually, the first super PAC that has been sending hundreds of thousands of dollars into our state was a super PAC that essentially is funded entirely by the Jeff Bezos family and the Michael Bloomberg family on her behalf. And the attack ads they're running have been so false that nonpartisan watchdog groups have had to step in to set the record straight to make it clear just how false they are.
15, and then we're moving to the next question.
Again, my opponent's focused on me. I'm focused on you, on the voters, on the issues that matter. This is why Governor John Lynch has said that your campaign is the most dishonest he's seen in 50 years.
Steve.
Ms. Goodlander, you've been criticized for the mandatory financial disclosure document you filed back in August that listed the value of dozens of assets, everything from bank accounts to investment funds to real estate properties, as undetermined. You've since updated that form with more information, and whatever the reason is for the initial gaps in that form, it certainly raised questions. What do you say to voters who have lost some trust in you over this?
What I'd say is I have been fighting for transparency and accountability my entire career. And just like every other candidate running for the House of Representatives, our campaign submitted the financial disclosure as required and on time. And we've gone back and provided even more information. And it's because I believe deeply in transparency, and this document is available to the public. I encourage anyone who wants to take a look to do just that, because it's a matter of public record, just like my record of public service to this state and to our country.
Next question from Ariel Metropolis.
Mr. Van Ostern, an ad supporting your campaign criticizes your opponent for not being sufficiently pro-choice because she made campaign donations to 2 Republican candidates. Is supporting a Republican candidate a significant enough reason to question someone's commitment to abortion rights?
You know, I wish it was just about that issue. That's a really important issue. It's an important issue to me. I ran for office in this state, represented 49 cities and towns on our state executive council, ran to get Planned Parenthood funding restored. I was raised by a single mom. This is a very personal issue to me, as is access to health care. I know what it's like to live without having health care, to know that you're a single accident or a really bad sickness away from losing everything. And so, yes, I think when you give thousands of dollars to Republicans or spend years of your life working for Republicans who are trying to undermine things like the public option as part of the Affordable Care Act, this is an important policy issue. I believe what's best for the people of New Hampshire is that we have a public option so anyone can opt into Medicare if they want it. I helped pass Medicaid expansion in our state, helped bring 100,000 people in our state, our friends, neighbors, into cheaper, better health care through the Affordable Care Act. And I think something like the public option is an important addition that we should look at, consider, and I think having spent time undermining that is a problem.
Ms. Goodlander, 30 seconds to respond.
My opponent has attacked my commitment to reproductive freedom, to my own freedom, and he's done this all the while knowing my record on these issues. He knows my professional record. He knows that I was a law clerk to Justice Stephen Breyer, who who wrote the dissenting opinion the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned. He knows that the day that decision came down, I was at the Justice Department helping to fight back, helping to make sure that women in this country get access to the health care they need. And he knows my personal experience. He knows that last year, when I was 20 weeks pregnant, my husband Jake and I lost our son. And I struggled to get access to the health care I needed. I ultimately got it, but I was left to manage a stillbirth on my own. My opponent knows this, but nevertheless, he attacks my commitment, and this is exactly why Governor John Lynch and other Democrats across this state have said he's running the most dishonest campaign they've ever seen. Colin, you were the spokesman for an anti-choice congressman. I am not questioning your commitment to reproductive freedom, and how dare you question mine?
Well, I would like to respond. First, I want to say, Maggie, thank you for sharing your story. I'm sure it's been hard. I hope that we get to a place as a country where you don't have to share stories like that in order to protect reproductive rights, but I appreciate you doing it. I think it's an important part of the process. I also think that what voters are watching for from us tonight is to hear ideas about how we can take our country forward, what we can do best to protect our fundamental freedoms. Look, they don't want to hear us argue. If you're curious about past donations or who we work for, check out nhfacts.com. You can look through all the details yourself. But what's important now is it's time for our next Congress to pass a law to protect the full range of reproductive rights, IVF, birth control, and abortion access, no matter where you live. And I will not stop till we get that done.
Ms. Goodlander, you just mentioned it. This is a complex and deeply personal issue for many women. If you could get the Republican votes to codify Roe v. Wade, but limit abortion in the third trimester, would you be willing to compromise on that?
I know from my own experience that it doesn't work for the health of women in this country, and it doesn't vindicate the deeply rooted principles of our Constitution for an extreme judge or an extreme politician, or any judge or politician, to stand in between women and their healthcare providers. And that's my position. Based on my own experience, and including my professional experience working in our courts and at the Justice Department, and thinking deeply about how the law is actually applied in practice, and from my own personal lived experience.
Yesterday, Georgia was the latest state to experience a school shooting when a 14-year-old killed 4 people. What gun law could Congress pass that would stand up to the current makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court, Ms. Goodlander?
Well, I was really proud to help lead the unity agenda for the Biden-Harris administration at the White House. And one of the core pillars was keeping our communities safe, keeping our kids safe. And we passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which gave more resources to public schools in this country to help prevent gun violence and to keep our kids safe. I think there is a lot that Congress can do and must do, because we cannot, thoughts and prayers are not enough. It is heartbreaking what we are seeing, the impact of Congress's inaction on our communities every single day. It breaks my heart to see parents losing their kids at school. There's a lot Congress can do. There are common sense solutions, including closing loopholes that exist, stepping up background checks, getting weapons of war out of our communities. I know from my experience serving in the United States Navy Reserve that weapons of war have no place in our communities, and Congress can take action on that. I'd also say that for far too long, the gun industry has gone unaccounted for. And what I know from my experience at the Justice Department is that if you want to make change, you have to go after the biggest actors in the business, and for far too long, the gun industry has gone unchecked. I want to change that.
And the same question to you, Mr. Van Ostern.
So I live in Concord, New Hampshire. I have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old who turns 14 next week. Last year, we had an active shooting in Concord at the state hospital. One of my kids was walking home from Runlet Middle School, which is about 3 blocks away as it happened. I immediately had an experience that I hope other parents don't have to, but I think tens of thousands are having now every year. You're on group text chains immediately with other parents. Who can pick up Peter? Where's Sam? Is Graham with them? Do you mind getting them? As that's happening, our kids are going through active shooter drills every single year. Now, the optimistic part of me believes that at least we're going to be electing new parents to Congress, new members of Congress who had these experiences themselves as kids, and we can find a bipartisan consensus to get something done. I'm a gun owner myself, but I also know there's nothing inconsistent between the Second Amendment, the second word of which is well regulated, and having basic gun violence prevention like universal background checks, like red flag laws. These are the things that matter to the voters in New Hampshire across political parties.
Next question from Steve Botari.
New Hampshire is set to receive more than $1.6 million to fund climate-related projects around the state. Many of your fellow Democrats want even more aggressive government spending when it comes to climate change issues. What assurances can you provide for already cash-strapped working families that your policies will not increase their costs in the short term? Mr. Van Ostern.
Well, one way we can specifically do that is ensure that we repeal some of the Trump tax cuts for the very wealthiest, very biggest corporations in the country. The truth is we need more fiscally responsible thinking in Washington, D.C. right now. We need to find ways to bring deficits down, bring budgets back under control. But we also need to be serious about tackling climate change. I represented the Ashwaylet River for 2 terms on the Executive Council. I saw 400-year flood stages in the 10 years before I served that area. The truth is we're in the early stages of climate change right now. It is in our economic best interest to tackle this, and we can do so by creating a clean energy economy and clean energy jobs here in New Hampshire. We need to build resilient communities, accelerate the transition to the clean energy economy, modernize our grid, invest in things like smarter energy storage because wind and solar are inherently intermittent. And what I've seen in the private sector is we also need to invest in weatherization and energy efficiency. Sometimes the most efficient and highest return on investment dollar that you spend is actually finding ways to conserve energy in the first place.
Same question, Ms. Goodlander.
Look, I hear about the high energy costs that people across this state are feeling the pain of every single day. We've got some of the highest energy costs in the country here in New Hampshire. And I'm glad you asked about the transition to the clean energy economy, because this is part of what we've got to continue to build on. And this is what I want to get to work on in Congress. I want to make the state of New Hampshire at the center of the movement of the United States of America towards being the clean energy superpower of the world. We know that from the Department of Defense, we know clearly that climate change, the climate crisis, is a threat to our national security. We also know that the transition to a clean energy economy is going to lower energy costs. It's also going to create new jobs here. I'm seeing this every single day on the campaign trail, the possibilities of what a clean energy future brings to us. At the same time, what I'd say is, this is a crisis that is not without a culprit. We know where the culprits lie when it comes to the climate crisis, and it's big oil companies that for far too long have been held unaccountable, not held accountable, and this is something Congress can do something about, and I want to be a part of that on day one.
Next question, Ariel Metropolis.
What additional legislation can you pass that would make it more difficult for future presidential candidates to overturn the results of a fair election? Mr. Van Ostern, we'll start with you.
Well, we do need federal legislation to protect election integrity in the United States of America. H.R. 1, the For the People Act, is an important part of that. I've also put forward a government reform agenda, ways that we can get big money out of politics, ways we can hold members of Congress to be more accountable, stop them from using information that they have as members to trade stocks and have other financial dealings. The truth is, election integrity is important to every single American. It should be a bipartisan issue. It's something I've spent a lot of time on here in the state of New Hampshire, ensuring that we protect free and fair elections. Part of that also means that we're supporting our nonpartisan election officials. We do elections better than almost anyone else in the country. And on Tuesday, as we all go vote, we're going to see friends and neighbors who are volunteering there, who are helping make the polls work. We're going to vote with paper ballots. We're going to do it the right way. And we need federal legislation to make sure some of these minimum standards apply to other states across this country as well.
Ms. Goodlander, the same question to you.
Look, I believe deep in my bones that no politician is above the law. And that's why I went and was a part of an incredible team of constitutional lawyers and investigators who impeached former president, now convicted felon Donald Trump for the first time. And look, it wasn't the last time he was impeached. Day 3 on this job is January 6th. It's a critical day in our nation's history. This is the most consequential election, perhaps in human history, and certainly in our nation's history. And January 6th is an important day, and Congress plays a central role in ensuring the peaceful transfer of power. What I saw at the Justice Department is that there are updates that can be made and must be made to our federal law, our federal criminal laws, to make sure that we are vindicating the principle that no politician is above the law. Congress can do a lot about that. I've been encouraged to see that there were updates to the Electoral Count Act, which go directly to how we ensure that every American, eligible American who casts their ballot has their ballot counted, and that we see this deep principle, this deeply American principle of the peaceful transfer of power, ensure that it happens.
Okay, last question, 30-second answers. Politics has become a major source of division in this country. This race has gotten a little personal too. Why are you the best person to unify Granite Staters? First to you, Ms. Goodlander.
I've been fighting for unity for my whole life, for my whole career. The job I left to come run for the seat was at the White House, leading the Biden-Harris administration's unity agenda. I think every single day about something that Ted Kennedy said. He said, always find the 30%. You might disagree with someone on 70%, but find the 30% and get it done. And you're right, we've got a deeply divided moment in our nation's history, but I will always look for and find the 30% or the 3% or the 0.3%, whatever it is. I'll find it and I'll get it done.
Mr. Van Ostern.
There's one job in our government. One job whose job is to know our lives here in the 2nd District of New Hampshire, to understand our communities and to advocate for us. Ahead of everything, ahead of politics, ahead of all the mess that's broken in Washington, D.C. I've spent 20 years of my life leading private sector businesses, representing 49 cities and towns, volunteering at nonprofits, coaching my kids' basketball teams. I've worked on things like getting the bridge restored in Hinsdale by bringing Republicans and Democrats together. Cars are going over that bridge next month. We need that sort of attitude, fighting for our district and understanding our lives in Washington.
All right, thank you very much. You can learn more about the candidates' positions on these issues and many others by going to WMUR.com or our free mobile app. You'll also find information about how to cast your ballot on Election Day. Join us back here tomorrow at 8 o'clock to hear from the primary candidates in the 1st District. Have a good night.